episode with the Metalist. That would be me. All right, so today, no product to show you guys. I've been kind of showing you CDs and T-shirts and stuff like that. But I kind of came up with this idea actually when I was doing one of my 5 CDs that you should own videos. If you haven't checked those out, please check them out and take a look at those. I'd appreciate it. And also, hit the subscribe button. That'd be awesome too. So what I got today kind of came about. It was something I thought of when I was doing one of those videos about the 5 records you should own. I was talking about Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow versus the mighty Rainbow Rising album. And I had mentioned that it's like, the debut album, it was okay. There's a lot of good songs in there. I like it, but it's not Rainbow Rising, right? So it kind of got me thinking, it's like, well, what's some other bands that kind of had kind of a rough start, if you will? Like they started off, and the first, maybe 2-3 albums are, yeah, they're decent. I don't hate them, and then they became great. And so I kind of started thinking about it, and I came up with 10 bands or artists that would fit that list. First one, most people think of as an artist, but it was a band to start with, is Alice Cooper. A lot of people aren't even familiar with like the first couple Alice Cooper albums. He put out 2 albums on Frank Zappa's label. And if you know anything about Frank Zappa, that's a whole lot of bizarre just waiting to happen right there. So Zappa was looking, he literally said he was looking for freak bands to put on his label, and he saw Alice Cooper out one of the Whiskey or someplace like that out in LA, and the Cooper band went on and pretty much had the room cleared within about 2 or 3 minutes. So Zappa's like, oh, I gotta have these guys. So anyway, so they put out 2 albums on Frank Zappa's label. First one's called Pretty's for You, and then the next one was called Easy Action. Now Easy Action is a definite improvement, but these are some weird records, and I don't listen to them, and quite frankly, some of them I don't own physical copies of. Some of them I do, but honestly, when I left Northeast Ohio and moved 1,100 miles south, where I don't have to put up with snow anymore, I pretty much did the Desert Island albums. So I brought down just a couple boxes of CDs. I mean, pretty much we left Ohio with everything you could carry in 2 PT Cruisers, and that was it. So we didn't have a whole lot of space. So a lot of my CDs are still in storage up in Ohio. And on those rare occasions when I go up there, I do usually grab some and bring them back along. So a lot of these, I don't have the physical product to begin with, and the ones that I do are probably in Ohio because these are records I'm not going to listen to. But anyway, so after Alice put out those first couple of records, then they put out, of course, Love It to Death, and then everything was great from there, pretty much. So Alice Cooper is the first one. Next one, these guys right here, Y&T. Now, Y&T is shortened for Yesterday and Today. Some of you may or may not know that. But the first 2 albums under the name Yesterday and Today, well, they're kind of cool collector's items and all that kind of stuff. Not great, especially the first one. Second one, Struck Down, has some pretty decent songs on it, But then they came along with the trilogy, starting with Earthshaker, and then, of course, Black Tiger, which I have here, and then Mean Streaks on the back of the shirt. And that's where they really kind of hit their stride. So these are some bands that took some time to hit their stride. And the thing about it is in this day and age, most of these bands would have never been heard from because you pretty much got one shot at things now, the way it is. Because, well, first of all, record companies aren't quite what they used to be, but record companies certainly wouldn't have the patience to wait on a band to put out, 3 or 4 albums before they really hit their stride. So that's why a lot of these records exist that probably wouldn't exist today. So the next 3 that I have on my list are all bands that I consider my top 4. I mean, 3 out of the top 4 bands didn't start off that good, okay? And so my cardinal pillars of rock and roll, as I like to call them, first one, of course, is Deep Purple. The very first concert I ever went to, first band that just kind of completely blew me away, but they blew me away on their 4th album, okay? So they had a period that is often referred to as Mark I, where they had a guy named Ron Evans singing, they had a guy named Nick Simper playing the bass, and then, of course, Blackmore, Lord, and Pace. And it wasn't, of course, till Gillan and Glover came along in 1970 that they really hit their stride within rock, which is pretty much the record that started it for me. That after I heard that, I was like, it was over. It was over. I was a hard rock and metal guy for life. Still am, obviously. Okay, so the Mark I version of Deep Purple, like I said, again, some decent songs, but their first 3 albums, you know, eh. They had a big hit with Hush. Hush is kind of a big hit, right? And that was on their first album, Shades of Deep Purple. And then they had Book of Taliesin, and then they had one just called Deep Purple. Quite frankly, I don't know if I've ever made it all the way through the third album. And it's just, it's just not my thing. And I guess probably a lot of it is I'm not much of a psychedelic guy and a space rock kind of guy. Some people are, not my thing. So there's a lot of people that really like these albums, and that's cool. I'm all for you. And like I say, leave some things in the comments, like albums, like you say, hey, I disagree with you on that. That's cool. Tell me why. I'd love to hear it. Like that, or maybe you say, hey, here's one that this is a band that their first album was kind of a little suspect, right? Love to hear some more in addition to the ones that I thought. I came up with this list in probably less than a minute. So Deep Purple was definitely one. Next one, of course, you've already heard me rave on and on if you've watched any of the other stuff on the channel, and that, of course, is UFO. And the first 2 UFO albums, again, are what we would call sort of space rock. To me, not very focused. They're not well recorded, kind of like really, really distorted. And, every now and then I'll pull them out just for the heck of it, give them a little spin for a while. Usually don't make it all the way through. And try to appreciate it for what it is, but it's not real UFO to me. Now some people, that's the only UFO. But of course, like I said, they put out UFO 1, UFO 2, then they doubled down with a live album. I'm like, oh, well, okay. But again, they were popular in Japan and they were popular in Germany at that point. And of course, Germany was where they picked up a guy named Michael Shanker, of course, right? And Shanker, when he joined in, the first album, Phenomenon, with him was kind of a transition. They have some classics on there like Lights Out. What am I saying? Like Doctor Doctor and Rock Bottom. How about those 2? Yeah. And, those are classics and, long-standing songs that are still on the set, till the end of the band, which may be done. I don't know. They might still be doing festival dates next year or later this year. And then there were some tunes that were still a little spacey, but they definitely had, like Schenker's feel on them. So, they were a definite improvement. And then, when Forced came out, I was like, yeah, this is the good stuff, and then they just kept progressing from there. So UFO, another one of my cardinal pillars of rock and roll, Deep Purple, UFO, and of course the third one, Thin Lizzy. Okay, the first version of Thin Lizzy, again, not a huge fan of. That would be the Eric Bell era, when they only had one guitarist named Eric Bell. Phil is Phil. You can't go wrong with Phil. And his charisma and just his vocal delivery and things like that, which did develop a little bit over those first couple albums. So he wasn't quite the Phil lineup we know and love just yet. But again, these albums, like I said, some people really like them, but like I said, a little more psychedelic, not quite as metallic, if you will. Which Thin Lizzy never got really, really seriously metal. Maybe Thunder and Lightning because of John Sykes. That one's a little heavier than some of the other ones, but just that melody and that twin guitar attack, it just wasn't there yet. So when Nightlife came along and they brought in Brian Robertson, Robbo, of course, as we call him, and Scott Gorham, that's when things really started moving. So that was some good stuff there. So that's 3 of my 4 bands. Iron Maiden is not on this list because their debut is freaking awesome. Okay. All right. So another band that most of us know and love that are into this type of music is Priest, Judas Priest, Rock-a-Rolla. But here's the thing. My understanding is that Rock-a-Rolla was written for a guy named Al Atkins, who was actually their singer before Rob Halford. So most of that material was written with that guy in mind, and from what I understand, I've never heard him sing, but just from what I've read, from what I understand, he was a very different singer from Halford. So that stuff was probably written with his voice in mind. Rob comes in, and Rob is Rob. He sounds good, but it just wasn't quite there. But the leap from Rock-a-Rolla to Sad Wings of Destiny, wow. That was just like stratospheric, if that is such a word. It just took off. The difference between those albums is just, it's mind-boggling. So that was really, to me, kind of the real debut of Judas Priest. Incidentally, a buddy of mine, Cliff, shout out to Cliff, he told me one time he went to an event. It was like a book signing for Eddie Trunk, and those of you that are familiar with Eddie Trunk, I'm sorry, I think the guy thinks he knows a lot more than he does, but, you know, he promotes metal, so I'm cool with it. But anyway, Eddie Trunk actually stood there and said to him that Phenomenon was UFO's debut album, and my buddy Cliff about lost his mind. I would have loved to have seen that. That would have been awesome. That would have been so good. But anyway, back to the list. Like I said, so Priest, like I said, their first record, yeah, not quite where they needed to be, but then they got it going. All right, so a little more obscure band, but a band I like because I was into Purple, was Trapeze. Now, Trapeze was Glenn Hughes' band before he joined Deep Purple in late 1973, early 1974, somewhere in there. Okay, love Glenn Hughes. Pretty much whatever Glenn Hughes does, yeah, I'm in. Okay, I mean, I could probably do a whole show on him, and I might sometime down the road. Who knows? But the first Trapeze album, it was produced by one of the guys from the Moody Blues, if I remember correctly. And it was like a 6-piece band, and they had like horns and stuff like that. So it was a little more like a Moody Blues album, you know, not necessarily my cup of tea. But then they went and they reduced it just to 3-piece. So it was just Glenn Hughes, Mel Galley, who shows up in White Snake and a couple other, you know, famous type of bands, and then Dave Holland, who later became the drummer for Judas Priest for about 10 years or so. It was just the 3 of them, and then they put out Medusa. Medusa is just, I think, a hard rock classic. You just have to hear it. The song Medusa is amazing. Black Cloud is amazing. I mean, it's just a super great record. But it was put out in, I think, 1970. So Glenn Hughes, I think, was still a teenager at that point. He still acts like a teenager, at least his voice does. The guy's freaking amazing to this day. Pretty excited the Dead Daisies are going to be in my area sometime in September. So I don't know, maybe we'll do a video about that when they come to town. But Glenn Hughes is currently in the Dead Daisies. That group is kind of a collective. People float in and out of it. Hopefully he won't float out by the time they get here. So kind of looking forward to that. I haven't seen Glenn Hughes on stage since 1986, when I saw one of the very few shows he did with Black Sabbath, but he had a little bit of a nose candy problem at the time. He liked to powder his nose from the inside. Let's see if anybody knows where that line came from. But you know, he only did like 6 shows, but it happened to be that the opening of the tour was in Cleveland. So I did get to see him there, and I don't remember him being bad, but I've heard some recordings, like bootleg recordings and stuff, not from there, but I think from Detroit, and yeah, a little scary. You know, sometimes you think it's better when you're there. It's like, oh man, it's Glenn Hughes, nice, you know. But anyway, Trapeze, definitely one. Okay, so this one is probably going to ruffle some feathers, and that's okay. And I'm not saying I hate this album, because I don't hate this album at all. Okay, the debut album from Rush. Okay, good record, really good record. But how much better is Fly By Night? A lot better, in my opinion. Your opinion may differ. That's cool. It's all good. But like I said, their first album, I mean, they don't have Neil, so the lyrics, yeah, a little bit lacking. That's okay. We all like Working Man, but I mean, you know, it's not exactly Neil Peart style lyrics. So, you know, but just a good solid rock album. No problems with it. But, you know, like I said, they, of course, you know, ascended to much greater heights after that. And it did get them going. And, of course, you know, on the back of the reissues of the Rush album, it does thank WMMS in Cleveland for getting them going. And if you watch the Rush documentary, what was it called? Beyond the Light of Stage, I think it was called. If you watch that, you know, they definitely talked to some of the folks at WMMS at the time about getting Rush going and getting them, you know, Broken America, basically. So that's pretty cool. Okay, a couple more on the list here. Next one, Dokken. Breaking the Chains, which I did not know this. I had heard this a while back. Breaking the Chains, there's a couple different versions of it. One version is under the name Dokken, one is under the name Don Dokken. And I guess they're different lineups, they're different players on it, you know, different running order on the record, different things like that. But Breaking the Chains, great tune. Silly video, but a great tune. The rest of the album, I mean, there's Paris is Burning is on there, which is cool, and that's a live thing, but I mean, it's kind of thrown together as far as I'm concerned, as far as what else is on the record. And then to go from that to like Tooth and Nail, wow. Tooth and Nail, of course, awesome record. Check that one out if you haven't. So yeah, the first Dokken record, and yeah, like I say again, don't dislike it, but man, they got a lot better pretty quick, as a matter of fact. And finally, last one I have on my list is Saxon. First Saxon album. I don't know, just kind of no punch to it, in my opinion. Like I say, not some bad songs on it. Don't hate it. Don't play it very often. But all of a sudden, after you do that, then you come out with Wheels of Steel and Strong Arm of the Law. Yeah, that's the stuff. I mean, and pretty much Saxon never looked back. So they were pretty awesome. So I'll end today with a little story about Saxon. And people that know me have heard this story a bunch of times, but for those of you that don't. Anyway, on my 24th birthday, I was trying to make a left turn and got T-boned by a full-size pickup truck who gunned the light. So he was probably going 60 miles an hour or more. And he hit me so hard that the passenger door, because he hit the passenger door was actually up against my leg when it was all said and done. Well, the only thing that happened to me, believe it or not, was I broke a collarbone. That was it. I assumed that probably the seatbelt was here, and I kind of swung into the steering wheel and probably broke the collarbone. But that was it. So that's all that happened. So, when they took me into the hospital, and they're talking about, oh yeah, we're going to go in there and we're going to cut it open and we're going to go ahead and put some plates in your shoulder, there, and then we'll take them out later. I'm like, yeah, no. As it turned out, I had an orthopedic guy at another hospital, so I got out of there, went to that guy, and he said, he says, what'll happen? He says, just keep it in the sling for about 6 weeks. He says, and your bone will grow together. He said, it'll kind of look like a lightning bolt. He said, it'll just like grow together like that. He said, but it'll never bother you, and it never has. So, but the moral of the story is, so that happened on my birthday. 2 days later, there's a knock on the door, right? I get up, and my mom's like, where are you going? We're going to see Saxon. What? We're going to see Saxon. You can't go to a rock concert. You just broke your collarbone. I'm like, no, this is Saxon. Don't you get it? It's Saxon. Never missed a Saxon show that came in the area. So we get there, and of course, am I standing in the back, just kind of watching the show? Nah, I'm down front. Got my little sling on. I'm like, I'm going like that. One buddy that went with me, my buddy Chris, haven't seen him since 1987. And he just kind of fell off the face of the earth at that point. As far as I know, he's still around. But Chris, if you ever happen to see these, say hi. Love to hear from you. Anyway, so I'm up there banging my head. My buddy Chris is looking. He says, Jesus Christ, doesn't that hurt? I'm like, yes. But I didn't care. It was a Saxon show. Had to be there. All right, so that'll wrap it up for today. So again, I'd love to see some comments as far as some bands you think that maybe had a rough start and then got a lot better, or maybe you disagree with some of my choices. That's cool too. Love to hear why. I mean, this is all about trying to develop some discussion about this stuff and talk about these. And maybe if you haven't heard this stuff, go check it out and see what you think for yourself. I mean, don't take my word for it. All right. But again, I appreciate you guys listening. Again, hit the subscribe button. That would be awesome. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.